Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down the incredible 300-year colonial contest that saw a complex, independent island fall, piece by piece, to three of history's most powerful empires. We're going to dive deep into the strategies, the alliances, and the betrayals that led to the total colonization of Sri Lanka. It's a really powerful story, and it shows us just how a nation's internal divisions can become its single most fatal weakness.
All right, let's set the scene. Our story kicks off in the early 1500s. And look, to really get what happens next, you have to understand one crucial thing. Sri Lanka back then, it wasn't one big unified country. Nope, it was a collection of rival kingdoms all jostling for power. So, when the Portuguese first sailed in, way back in 1505, this is the scene they walked into. The island was totally divided. You had a few major players: the Kingdom of Kota down in the southwest, the Kingdom of Kandy up in the central mountains, and the Kingdom of Jaffna way up north. And this division, this political fragmentation, well, that was the key. It was the crack in the door that would let outsiders in.
Now, you might think they showed up guns blazing, ready to conquer, but that wasn't the plan, at least not at first. Their goal was simple: commerce. They were absolutely laser-focused on getting a monopoly on the island's super valuable cinnamon trade. But, they were smart. They watched, they listened, and they saw all this constant fighting between the local kingdoms. And right away, they knew that was a weakness they could use to their advantage. Okay, so how exactly did the Portuguese turn these divisions into actual footholds on the island? Well, their approach was pretty much a masterclass in strategy. They didn't just have one playbook. They adapted to whatever the local situation was, using a mix of clever diplomacy and, when that didn't work, just plain old brute force. Check this out. They had this brilliant two-pronged strategy. Down south, in the Kingdom of Kode, they played the long game. It was all about politics. They'd get involved in who was next in line for the throne, back their favorite candidate, and just stir the pot until the whole kingdom was eventually just handed over to them in what they called a deed of gift. But up north, totally different story. The Kingdom of Jaffna fought back, and fought back hard. So there, the Portuguese just went in with military force and took it by conquest. So what's the big takeaway here? Well, what's fascinating is the outcome of all this. These long, brutal wars led to the total collapse of those powerful coastal kingdoms. Suddenly, the Portuguese controlled the most valuable real estate on the island, both in terms of people and money. But there was one holdout. Tucked away in the mountains, the Kingdom of Kandy survived. It became the last bastion of independence, and that set the stage for the next century and a half of struggle.
All right, so picture this. The Portuguese now control the entire coastline. The Kingdom of Kandy is the last one standing, completely surrounded. They had to make a move, a really high-stakes gamble. They knew they couldn't take on the Portuguese by themselves, so they started looking around for a new, powerful friend.
And this was the million-dollar question for Kandy's ruler, King Raja Singha II. Think about it. His kingdom is landlocked, way up in the mountains. He has no navy, zero access to the sea. So how on earth is he supposed to kick out a major European sea power that controls literally every single port? His answer to that question, well, it would change everything.
He found his answer in a brand new player on the world stage, another European power that was already giving the Portuguese a run for their money all over Asia, the Dutch East India Company, also known as the VOC. Now let's be clear, this was not just some trading company. The VOC was basically a state-sponsored megacorporation. The Dutch government gave it the power to wage war, build fortresses, sign treaties. I mean, this was a company with its very own army and navy. So, Kandy decided to roll the dice. In 1638, the king signed a treaty with the Dutch. The deal was pretty straightforward. Kandy would use its forces to fight the Portuguese on land, and in return, the Dutch would bring in their massive navy to kick the Portuguese off the island for good. It was a classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
So did the plan work? Well, yes and no. From a purely military standpoint, it was a huge success. But what happened next was one of the single most ruthless betrayals in this whole 300-year story. It's a real turning point. And at first, it worked like a charm. The alliance did exactly what it was supposed to do. For about 20 years, the Kandyan and Dutch forces just systematically tore down Portuguese power, piece by piece. The Dutch Navy took the port of Gale, then they captured the main prize, Colombo,
and finally Jaffna up north. And just like that, by 1658, after a century and a half, the Portuguese were gone.
But this is where the story takes a really dark twist. The second their common enemy was gone, the Dutch showed who they really were. As soon as they captured Colombo, the last big Portuguese stronghold, they literally, and I mean literally, slammed the city gates shut right in the faces of their Kandyan allies. The deal was off. They refused to hand over anything. And this moment just perfectly captures the ruthless nature of this whole colonial game. The Dutch just took over. They grabbed all the former Portuguese territories for themselves and seized complete control of the island's incredibly valuable trade. We're talking cinnamon, gems, pearls, the whole shebang. They plugged the island's economy right into the global market. So in the end, Kandy had managed to kick out one European master, only to watch them be immediately replaced by a new one.
Incredibly, Kandy managed to hold on for almost another 150 years, resisting the Dutch. But its final downfall would come at the hands of a third and final European empire, the British. And the way they did it, well, it was a strategy that was chillingly familiar.
So fast forward to the end of the 18th century. Now it's the British Empire's turn at the wheel. In 1796, they boot the Dutch out and take over all their coastal territories. And now they're staring at the exact same problem that had stumped the Portuguese and the Dutch for centuries. How do you conquer the impenetrable mountain fortress that was the Kingdom of Kandy?
But the British were different. Instead of launching some huge, bloody invasion, they played a much sneakier, more subtle game. Their whole strategy was to use the growing tensions between the Kandyan king and his own powerful nobles. They had this agent, a guy named John Doyley, who was secretly whispering in the ears of the rebellious chiefs, encouraging them, supporting a full-blown revolt, all with the goal of stepping in and taking over once the chaos hit. They basically wanted the kingdom to destroy itself from the inside out.
And when the end finally came, it wasn't with some epic final battle. No, it was with the stroke of a pen. On March 2nd, 1815, after the king had been captured, his own rebellious chiefs sat down and signed something called the Kandyan Convention. And with that single treaty, they just handed over their entire kingdom, the very last piece of an independent Sri Lanka, to the British crown. So let this sink in for a second. The really crucial point here is that after 300 years of fighting off foreign armies, the final nail in the coffin wasn't an invasion, it was a conquest from within. The British didn't need to defeat Kandy's army on the battlefield. They just had to pour fuel on the fire of its internal conflicts until the whole thing just collapsed on its own. And that really leaves us with a pretty provocative question, doesn't it? This entire 300-year saga was fueled again and again by local kingdoms teaming up with foreign powers just to get an edge on their local rivals. So you have to wonder, what if? How different would history look if, just one time, they had put aside those internal squabbles and stood together against the outside threat?